CTV News Update. The House Appropriations Committee begins hearings on the Capitol Hill insurrection. Acting Capitol Police Chief Yogananda Pittman appeared before the panel virtually this morning. She told lawmakers the agency had intelligence that armed protesters could be coming to the Hill on January 6th, but they didn't have specific credible threats that thousands would attack the Capitol. Asked about a lack of communication among officers, Pittman said incident protocols were not followed.
So when there's a breakdown, you look for those commanders with boots on the ground to provide that instruction. That did not happen primarily because those operational commanders at the time were so overwhelmed, they started to participate and assist the officers with boots on the ground versus providing that guidance and direction, if you will.
The Senate held hearings on the insurrection earlier this week. Delegate Julian Ivey has introduced legislation to make it easier to vote in Maryland. House Bill 153 would require the automatic mailing of ballots to registered voters statewide. That's what the Board of Elections did during the 2020 primaries. Ivey says not only did it make it easier to cast a vote, but it increased turnout.
We had so many individuals participate who hadn't been participating in our primary election process. They got involved. And part of the reason why is because a ballot was sent to their door and it was that easy for them to participate. They could vote when they were on the clock at work. They could vote when they're dropping their kids off to go to school, things of that nature. It just made it so much easier to actually participate in the electoral process.
Other bills before the General Assembly call for ballot drop boxes to be permanent fixtures around the state. A Frederick, Maryland man is convicted of voter intimidation for threatening a family with Biden-Harris campaign signs. 42-year-old James Reed was charged with 1 count of threat of mass violence and 1 count of voter intimidation. Judge Eric Schaefer sentenced Reed to 2 years in prison, but suspended it to the 132 days in jail already served. Reed must complete 3 years of supervised probation. A Maryland lawmaker has introduced legislation that would mandate implicit bias training for the court system and law enforcement. 2 bills sponsored by Delegate Melissa Wells of Baltimore City would require members of the court system and law enforcement to undergo the training. The legislation aims to reduce the potential risk for bias by police as well as judges when sentencing people of different races.
And so this legislation is looking at, one, we know that all of us have some kind of unconscious bias, regardless of race, gender. We all carry it. And so this legislation is really, one, saying we identify that this is real, but we also need to make sure that we are consciously understanding our own bias. And so that's what this legislation is seeking to do, is to say, let's begin to evaluate it. And then let's also begin to have a conversation around how we, address that bias.
A hearing on the legislation was held in the House Judiciary Committee earlier this week. A local university teams up with the state legislature to examine how proposed laws could impact minority communities. Bowie State is participating in a pilot program to assess the racial impact of state laws. Staffers working with the Legislative Services Office are creating a data inventory to see if legislation is racially biased. Some of the bills being reviewed involve police reform.
Oftentimes, in terms of bills and legislation that are passed, they don't really take into consideration the impact that it will have on particular groups. And so we know in terms of criminal justice that African Americans and Hispanic individuals are come in contact with the criminal justice system at a disproportionate rate. So any criminal justice bill has the potential to impact African American and also minority groups.
The pilot program will last for the remainder of this legislative session. In other news, here are the latest numbers from Maryland's COVID-19 dashboard. The state reports 976 new cases and 16 deaths in the last 24 hours. The hospitalization rate is down slightly. The testing positivity mortality rate has dropped slightly as well to 3.74%. COVID has claimed more than 7,600 lives in Maryland. Governor Larry Hogan says the state has seen an increase in fraud related to the COVID-19 vaccine. During a press conference earlier this week, Hogan stressed that Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are free to all Marylanders. You don't need insurance or Social Security information to get the shots. Hogan says if someone tries to sell a vaccine, it's a scam.
You can access and verify information regarding all authorized providers at covidvax.maryland.gov. And if you see something that doesn't look right or sound right to you, if you suspect any type of fraudulent activity, we ask that you immediately report it to law enforcement so that we can go after them and shut them down and that we can arrest the individuals responsible. Anyone who attempts to prey on innocent people in this life and death crisis will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Police have arrested a suspect in a fatal Riverdale Park shooting. Authorities say this man, 24-year-old Desmond Imba of Bowie, is in custody for a fatal carjacking on February 11th. Riyad Al-Janabi was working as a security guard 2 weeks ago today when he was shot on 54th Avenue. The suspect is being held without bond. While you're watching CTV News, I'm Keisha Butts. Back in one moment. Welcome back. Maryland State Police are investigating a fatal accident on the Beltway. It happened yesterday afternoon just after 12:30 on the outer loop near Route 450 in the New Carrollton area. Investigators say a man was running across the highway from the right shoulder to get to his disabled car when he was hit by a Honda Accord. The victim has been identified as 26-year-old Ryan Kane of Virginia. The driver did remain at the scene. In other news, lawyers fined parents of 105 separated migrant children this past month. But the Committee of Pro Bono Lawyers and Advocates working on reunification say they have yet to find the parents of 506 children and that 322 were likely to have been deported. The news comes after the announcement of President Biden's proposed U.S. Citizenship Act legislation that would create a national strategy for immigration reform. The measure has strong support for immigrant rights groups and many lawmakers.
You know, I think that if anyone can do it, is Biden, right? He served in the Senate for so many years. He has so many friendships. And as we know, when we, put in these bills, it's all about relationships. And there are 11 million people in our country that are undocumented. And he has a plan. It's an 8-year pathway to citizenship. And, he's trying to reach across the aisle. And I'm hopeful. Would it be tough? Yes, it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult, but I think the country's ready for it.
Given what's been going on during this crisis, why is it important now to have a new immigration policy go through?
It's important because we are in the middle of a pandemic that does not discriminate against anyone. The zip code with the highest number of COVID-19 cases is 20783, which is the immigrant Latino community. These are essential workers that are taking care of us, of our economy. This is the right thing to do now.
Biden has revived the task force on new Americans within the White House. The Obama-era office was created to lead a national strategy on immigrant and refugee inclusion. General Assembly leaders have done just about everything in their power to make sure the legislature runs smoothly during the pandemic. That includes the public having unfettered access to hearings. But that doesn't always make it easy for those who are testifying for or against legislation. Karen York with the Job Opportunities Task Force says it's been a difficult learning process for witnesses.
We have to, create a MGA account for them, and then make sure that they are ready to receive the email that has the Zoom link, and then click on that Zoom link at a certain period of time. The hearings could start at 1:30, but your bill may not be heard until 3:30. And how do you make sure that you're in a space that allows you to be able to zoom in. You have maybe a minute or two, right, to be able to offer your story and to be able to offer your story in a way where folks feel that it's compelling, that they understand, and that you feel that you were effective in your storytelling. That's very difficult to do when you're not familiar with the Zoom setup and when you only have like 1 minute to tell your story, your experience. It's very unnerving, it's jarring, and quite honestly, it's just challenging, not just for the individuals, but for the organizations that are helping and supporting these individuals. And we're asking them, like, yes, your voice counts. You should absolutely testify. And then they have to go through that, and they just kind of feel so dejected and so demoralized because they wonder, did my 1 minute of testimony even matter?
York encourages those who want to testify on legislation to not get discouraged with the new system. She says lawmakers need to hear from the public. Those COVID positive rapid tests that forced quarantines at the Maryland Senate Tuesday turned out to be false positives. Senate President Bill Ferguson says follow-up tests returned negative results. 6 senators were absent from Tuesday's floor session, many of whom attended a long committee hearing on police reform earlier this week. Protocols in place require follow-up PCR tests if lawmakers or staff test positive during a rapid test. A tool that can protect your home from thieves can get you free money from the city of Bowie. The Bowie Police Department is offering $50 rebates to city residents with exterior home security cameras. The city provided $20,000 to fund the program. Lieutenant John Knott says these cameras can provide police with useful information that can help solve crimes.
When you go online and fill out the application, you got to provide us with the receipt. It has to be purchased either on November 17th of 2020 or after to be eligible. Of course, it has to be mounted on a Bowie address, actually in the incorporated city of Bowie. And you have to be the purchaser. So if you got it, if somebody gave it to you as a gift, you're not going to get an additional rebate. The person who bought it can apply for the rebate.
Knott says residents who receive rebates are not required to share video with police. For more information, visit cityofbowie.org. Thanks to 2 DMV tech companies, students at Charles Flowers High School had a special day this week. Lidos and Steam Board distributed 90 coding kits to students in the school's engineering program. The students used the kits to create backup sensors for cars. They displayed them yesterday during a virtual presentation. Teacher Victoria Lee says the hands-on learning is important.
Most kids have been inside of a car when their parents back up and they hear the beep, beep, beep. But to take what you know, that prior knowledge, and apply it to what it is that you're actually building and doing, it just builds the learning excitement.
I hope they can get out of using the kids, again, is that curiosity about technology, curiosity and all of the creative and wonderful things they can do with the kids.
Lidos has partnered with Flowers for about 5 years. Looking for a fun outdoor activity for your children? They can learn how to score a hole-in-one at the Country Club at Woodmore's free golf clinic. The first one is tomorrow at 4 p.m. As we told you earlier this week, it's for kids ages 8 to 18. The Country Club says it's a great opportunity for youngsters.
It's very apparent that there is a demographical gap. There's not many Black children that have been exposed to golf, whether they like it or not. So we took an opportunity to be able to provide a free clinic for the neighborhood, for the kids in PG County and surrounding neighborhoods to be able to come out and first and foremost see whether they enjoy it.
For more information, visit ccwoodmore.com. Well, let's get a quick check on our 3-day weather forecast. Tonight, partly cloudy with a low around 32. Friday, mostly sunny with a high near 47 and a low around 38. Saturday, mostly cloudy with a high near 55 and a low around 45 degrees. Sunday, rain throughout the morning. Daytime temps reach a high near 55 and a low around 45. And now for the community calendar. Calling all parents and scholars, join Councilmember Danielle Glaros and Prince George's County Public Schools CEO Monica Goldson for lunch during a virtual Connections. You'll hear updates about school reopening plans and more. The luncheon is next Wednesday, March 3rd from 12 to 12:45 p.m. Registration is required. For more information, visit pgcps.org. And that's your CTV News update. I'm Keisha Betts. Have a good night.